Hello, welcome to the EPG Pathshala program in Linguistics. I am Professor Ravinder Gargesh from the Department of Linguistics, University of Delhi. The fourth module in Linguistics and Stylistics is language style. So we will focus on language style. In this module, we will look at the concept of style, whether style is language choice, style is resulting from context sensitivity, and we will also try to see what kinds of styles exist in ordinary language and literary language. And of course, we have to make a distinction between connotation. What is connotation? Now, the objective of this module is to give you an idea about what constitutes style in language, and also provide various varieties of style, kinds of styles. And within the domain of social linguistics and stylistics, it is generally recognized that style is a result of systematic contextualized language choice. So we'll look upon this. What is this contextualized language choice? And also, in passing, we will make a distinction between overt style and covert style in passing. Of course, overt style means when we use linguistic features or style features to identify a person, to identify a group, to identify a speech community, to identify a text. So the language or stylistic features is a marker of that identification of person or dialect or social act or text. The function of style is overt. The style serving as an identificatory marker, style functioning as a linguistic fingerprint to identify something is overt style. Function of style is overt. On the other hand, as you have already know about it in module 2 and module 3, that meaning emerges from the text, the kind of meaning Roman Jakobson talked about, message for message sake. How does language in message for message sake create meaning? The kind of patterns, the kind of features that help us in arriving at the meaning, or the help the text in expressing itself. So identification of those style features will be there to identify in the text, within the text itself, as carrying forward the artistic intent. Those style features identified will be said to be covert style. So two kinds of styles. Now we have already seen that language consists of the totality of linguistic resources of a speech community. Now the choice of linguistic expressions from the verbal repertoire constitutes style. We may say that style constitutes, or style is identified by alternative ways of saying the same thing. If the same thing can be said in different ways, then we can identify them stylistically. And of course, style can have an identificatory function and expressive function. The identificatory function exists in the choice of language by speakers that identifies them as members of a group, or as individuals, or of a community, or of a social group, or of a regional group. So there are linguistic choices. One can make choices and use language accordingly, even consciously. And texts do that very, very clearly. We'll talk more in detail about that. So there is an identificatory function and there is an expressive function. Please keep that in mind. And of course, we need to keep in mind that the foregrounded language is required when we talk about the covert function, the covert style. In the overt style, in the linguistic identification, stylistic identification, quantification of features is enough. Now, what is style? Style has been a problem area within linguistics and within even literary studies. It has not been well understood. How can style be identified? Can we put a finger on some linguistic element and call it style? We identify phonemes through minimal pairs. We identify words. We identify morphemes, distinct lexicon, distinct syntax, and each of them can be identified physically in linguistics. Can we identify style physically? This has been a problem. This has been a problem. The style is not identifiable in that sense, as a phoneme, morpheme, and a sentence can be identified. It is different. Any linguistic patterning will go beyond the sentence itself. But then even that would not be actually style. Style involves much more. The first question is whether style can be a category of linguistics, like the phoneme, like the morpheme. Because all these forms are defined by the function that they perform in the language. Phoneme has a function, morpheme has a function, lexicon has a function, syntax has a function. All these are functional, and they're physically identifiable. They can be recognized. But then this is not the whole truth. There are many scientific constructs which do not have a physical identification. We know gravity is one construct, a very important construct. You can't identify gravity. Ether, it cannot be identified in that sense. In linguistics, the concept of archiphoneme cannot be physically identified. It emerges from the function. It is in a similar way that style is identified through function. There's a structure and there's a function. So certain terms are identified in the system because of their functions in the system. So within linguistics, style would be a term that has a distinct function. It has structures, but not entirely definable by structures, because they can be grammatically defined also, but through their function. So this is the first important thing, that it is important. Even within linguistics, we know that from the perspective of Hockett, from the perspective of Firth, from the perspective of Chomsky, postulates about grammar, language universal have all been very different. Different models of linguistics do not view the same phenomena in a similar way. So similarly, since there is such variety, we need to see style in a different way. Style needs to be accepted as a theoretical construct of linguistics, not based on physical properties of elements, but on the abstract relations meant to rationalize, to explain certain facts related to language functions. There are certain facts which remain unanswerable unless we use style. Riffater, in this context, had made a very important statement. He defined style, he saw style in terms of choice, language choice, alternative ways of saying the same thing. But this choice led to not only choice, which could be identified structurally, but something more. He said style is understood as an emphasis. The emphasis can be expressive, affective, or aesthetic. It is added to the information conveyed by the linguistic structures without alteration of meaning. This means that language choices give us structures, but the structures cannot be explained in terms of emphasis, in terms of affectivity, in sort of aesthetic function. So when we combine these two, the functions and the structure, only then we have style. So it goes beyond grammatical configurations. We need to bring in functions of language. We have another famous scholars, Geoffrey Leach and Michael Short, Nick Short. They have a very interesting book called Style in Fiction. So they also say that literary stylistics has implicitly or explicitly the goal of explaining the relation between language and artistic function. It is again related to function. So without function, style cannot be defined within linguistics. And if language functions are part of linguistics, style is a construct of linguistics, sure. Now, style as language choice. How do we see style as a part of emanating from choice? We have right at the beginning said, language is a differentiated system. It means that language functions on differences and differences. It is a heterogeneous system. Unlike the grammarians, for whom language is homogeneous, language is uniform. So in a uniform language, you can cut out, you can identify, you can dissect and bring out certain structures and identify them. That is possible. But then that is only the grammatical function. Where is the meaning? You may ask a question, but it may not be a question, it will be a statement. So the grammatical structure may not convey the proper intent, communicative intent. In that sense, we need to look at language functionally, and for looking at language functionally, language is a differentiated system. It's full of variations and variations and variations. We choose out of the variant forms and express ourselves. This is what we are going to talk about in this module. Let us take some examples. Now, in social linguistics, language is full of linguistic variations, and speaker is in control of more than one style of language. The speaker has the ability to choose and then speak. Of course, Lubov says that there are no single style speakers in language. Everyone speaks different, many styles in one, many styles. Even language in society is constituted by many styles. We'll talk about this later. Let's take a simple example. Oft taken example in linguistics. For example, it may be said that there are two ways of negating the sentence. I can eat anything is a sentence positive. I can eat anything. How to negate this sentence? How can we negate it? Either the verb or the pronoun can be negated. If the verb is negated, we say, I can't eat anything. Use the modal, I can't eat anything. In the case of pronoun, I can eat nothing. So two ways of negating. Literature has pointed out that some societies, some group of speakers use double negatives. They use double negatives. I can't eat nothing. I can't eat nothing. This is spoken many places in America, identified with black speakers by William Lubov, non-native, non-standard English. So it is considered to be non-native, spoken by speakers in Detroit. So social linguistic research reveals that there is a clear relationship between frequency of double negation and social class. It's a group of speakers who is identified by the use of this. It does not mean that one group uses it only. Other group use it too. Some more, some less. Trudgill brought out some percentages of the use of double negatives, and he found them as follows: that the upper middle class used only 2% double negatives, lower middle class 11%, Upper working class, 38%. Lower working class, 70%. So there are no single style speakers. Some use more features are dominant in one group and they are less dominant in another group. But their features are everywhere. So they just identify because of the quantum of the use of the features. Simple mechanical mathematical count. So this fact presupposes that on the one hand, language evinces more than one option to convey the linguistic meaning. We can negate the pronoun, or we can negate the verb, or we can use double negatives. All three. There are different ways of conveying the same meaning. And on the other, it's a contextualized choice. Choice is made in context. And this choice in context conveys social meaning. For example, the use of double negatives identifies a group. That's the social information given to us. So language is choice, and when we choose out of different patterns, different structures, this choice results in can be identified as style in one way. And then of course we need to see the functions. According to Charles Hockett, according to him, he said, roughly speaking, two utterances in the same language which convey approximately the same information but which are different in their linguistic structures can be said to differ in style. Two utterances in the same language which convey the same meaning, approximately the same meaning, but which are different in their linguistic structures, they are different in style. So style results from language choice, according to Hockett. Same idea is carried forward by many other linguists. Bloch had identified it with frequency, the message carried by the frequency distributions and transitional probabilities of its linguistic structures. That will define style. Martin Juice also took up the idea of frequency distribution, and he has a very interesting small booklet, The 5 Clocks, in which he identified 5 styles. 5 major style categories of English he identified: frozen, formal, consultative, casual, and intimate styles. The frozen form being shown in, for example, when our people take taking oath in parliament, or taking oath for some post, then the language of the oath is frozen. It's the same language. Just the name is different, everything is the same. It's a frozen language. Formal languages, we know that politeness, the aap form of Hindi. And then we have consultative, which is the tum variety. There's casual speech. There is intimate speech, intimate between friends. It doesn't only refer to pronouns, it goes into the whole gamut of language. So he has given some very interesting examples. Do read The 5 Clocks by Martin Juice. Lubov, another person who correlated style with language variation. He correlated with socio-economic context, lower middle class, upper middle class, working class, etc. In his model, the way he tried to study variation, he identified styles of speech based on utterance features such as casual speech, careful speech, reading list, word list, minimal pairs. These were the 5 styles identified by Lubov, which he found in use in society, and it is on data gathered on the base of these 5 features that he had given his whole concept of social linguistic variable. His styles of speech are based on linguistic variation associated with the amount of attention paid to variables in the context of speech. Whether the attention on casual facts, attention on reading facts, attention on word list, minimal pair, the style will become different. That is what Lubov did in his research. The vernacular style for Lubov, is the most basic amongst language varieties. So, according to Lubov, style is restricted to the parameter which defines the amount of attention paid by a speaker to his speech. So, the amount of attention one pays, the language will have a different structure. Halliday also came up with the concept of style. He used the category register in a very wide sense. For him, linguistic system is made up of very large set of options, very large number of options, and each set having certain constraints. So everything is conditioned by choice. His definition of register is that register is choice made by use. Choice made by use is register. That's his definition, how he defines style. And he looks at register in a threefold perspective. A register consists of field, mode, and tenor. Field of discourse, mode of discourse, tenor of discourse. By field of discourse, he means classification of the register into subject types, language dependent on a specialized subject, the field of study. For example, chemistry. The use of passive constructions in experiments in chemistry. A test tube was taken, salt was added, this was done, that was done. Use of passives in chemistry. So this is the field. The field determines the language and also the vocabulary, specialized vocabulary. Religion being another. Different fields will have different kind of vocabulary and maybe different kind of grammatical manifestation as well. Then another division is the mode of discourse. The mode of discourse is something like the written mode or the spoken mode. The spoken mode has a different style. For example, when people speak, there are a lot of repetitions. Sentences are incomplete. Contexts are known and answers are given in absolutely maybe even phrases or maybe in words. But in written, it is formal style and sentences are complete. Contexts are built in and it is complete. They don't leave sentences incomplete in writing. But in speech, sentences are generally incomplete. So looking at this, we know that according to Halliday, field and mode. Now there is manner of discourse. Manner of discourse depends upon what is the kind of role between two persons. There may be elder person, there may be a younger person. So one may use the more polite form, the other may use a relatively impolite form or a casual form of speech. Age difference, the speaker, the person who is younger will be more polite and the elder may be less polite. So such differences keep coming up in social categories. When social differences are there between speakers, all these come under manner. So these depend on interpersonal relations. Manner depends upon interpersonal relations, what is the relationship between speakers, and depending upon the interpersonal relations, they will choose use a formal variety or informal variety, and so on. Now there's another thing, not only language is choice, but language is a result of context sensitivity. It is the context that gives it greater value to what we choose out of the verbal repertoire that we have. We can say that style is a function of contextually sensitive linguistic variation. Contextually sensitive variation, and we make choices, and choices are systematic. Context can generate meanings distinct from purely referential and emotive ones. We may have the same grammatical form, make a change in the context, the meaning will change. So context is very important for identifying and defining style. Let's take an example. I would like you to turn off the radio. 1. Will you turn off the radio? Can you turn off the radio? 3 sentences. I would like you to turn off the radio. Will you turn off the radio? Can you turn off the radio? Literally speaking, do you think this is about an assertion about speaker's attitude? Is it about questioning his ability? Can you turn off the radio? Is it about ability? No. Will you turn off the radio? Yes or no? I would like you to turn off the radio. Is it a command? All these are different ways. All these are different ways of asking a person to do something. They mean the same thing. Turn off the radio. They mean the same thing. But they could mean 2 different things in 2 different contexts. If we use this in anger or irritation, then the 3 sentences would have force of a directive. In polite situation, all three forms serve as request forms. I would like you to turn off the radio. Can you turn off the radio? Will you put off the radio? All these are request terms. But if you see it in anger, I would like you to turn your radio. Well, that's a command. Will you turn off the radio? It shows anger. So it implicates anger. Some more information is being provided to us. So this more information cannot be left out. This is important for a feature like style. So context supplies the proper shape of meaning. Now to look at this further, how many kinds of styles one can perceive, we can make a study. Halliday and his associates had made a distinction between use-oriented language and user-oriented language. If we put the 2 together, we can drop a big paradigm which will give us different types of styles. We can say that style as a broad category has 3 subcategories. 1, speech community. 2nd, discourse. 3rd, individual. Again, style has 3 categories, subcategories: speech community, discourse, and individual. When an individual uses similar forms, when his output is systematic, then his language identifies him. Then we can talk about the linguistic fingerprints of an author. These also can be linguistic fingerprints of a group, linguistic fingerprints of an age, of a society. If they are non-systematic, then they are random, like a madman's talk. So individual has either systematic variation or non-systematic variation. And it is systematic variation that identifies greater number of people as individuals. Everyone has a different way of speaking, different way of writing. It can be linguistically identified. Non-systematic identifies a different kind of a person who either is a non-conformist or who doesn't fit in the society. The speech community, again, the variations in the speech community, the variations in the language give us 2 subcomponents. One is spatial, the other is temporal. Spatial and temporal. In the space, in geographical space, 2 more forms can be had. One resulting from regional variation, which we call dialects, and the other emanating from social groups, distinct socio-economic groups, sociolects. So we can have dialect, we can have a sociolect. From the total verbal repertoire, a speaker in India, a speaker in Delhi, coming from different regions of India, can choose and speak in the dialect, can choose and speak in the standard, can choose and speak in one sociolect and can choose and speak in another sociolect, provided the person has exposure. That variation is in the verbal repertoire. Then we have the temporal one. Temporal means variations at the level of age, time. Very broad distinctions are there. Old English, Middle English, Modern English. The great vowel shift between Middle English and Modern English. So one looks at language in that term also. That also identifies a variety. Then the most important is discourse. Discourse can be divided into the three that Halliday had defined: the field or domain, the mode, and the tenor, or the median and the tenor. Let's say medium. Domain, medium, and tenor. The domain is the field, as we earlier talked about. If it's a subject in chemistry, language will be one type. If it is linguistics, vocabulary of another type, maybe syntactic constructions too. That's one kind of style of a field. Another one is medium. Medium could be oral, medium could be written. As I told you that oral speech is stylistically different from written speech. Oral speech is marked by repetitions, is marked by incomplete sentences, less of relative clauses, where written variety has more of relative clauses, compact, complete sentences. Then the third one is tenor, the tenor of discourse. Tenor of discourse, the manner of discourse. How does speech differ, language differ in manner? Again, four categories can be subcategorized. One is the variation would depend upon role relation. The variation would depend upon what kind of role do you have: father, son, master, servant. These roles would determine the output, and these are stylistic outputs. Then there is role participation. When you participate in an activity, what kind of language are you using? Suppose you are polite to someone and suddenly you fight, you become impolite. The relationship changes, participation changes. So role participation can lead to another variant form. This again is stylistic. Then there is another mode of speaking. One is dialogue. People speak to each other in dialogue form. There is a monologue also. So such differences could be considered as under mode. And then there is another parameter called modality. Under modality, language, we are forced to use language by certain institutions. And when we are forced to use by them, our structures change, our output changes, and language has another style, an institutional style. Now, of course, it is finished, but we had the telegram. Now we have the SMS. The language of the telegram was highly concentrated because it would cost money. So people became very economical in words. In SMS language today, people want to communicate fast. Therefore, abbreviations using numerical letters for English words has become. Using the numeral 4 for, and so on. Using the alphabet U for YOU. So again, style. These are styles. They depend upon what is required in an institution. In SMS, it is quick sending of quick message, and in Telegram it was condensed message. But then the institution made us use the language in that way, in that particular style. So these are the ways in which styles can be different within a society. Again, to recapitulate, non-systematic style of an individual and systematic styles. Systematic styles, we have pen names of people, their own way of writing, and dialects of a style. One can find different dialects. One say, oh, he's speaker of that dialect, he belongs to that region, identification. social acts also, and one can enter that society and use that style. And in the domain, the field, variation dependent upon field, variation dependent upon spoken or oral, variation dependent upon role relation, role participation, or the mode, dialogue form, monologue form, or the institutional features. So all these make us use language differently on different occasions. Our knowledge of language is same, but in all these different parameters bring out something else from us. We make choices and we put them into our structures, and they become stylistic because they convey these kind of meanings. Either the meanings in terms of role relation, or meanings in terms of role participation, or institutions, or fields, or about regions, or about social classes. So this kind of information we get, and all the variant forms that we get are styles. These are all styles. These are all styles. So we can say this is the typology of style. So if we have a dialect, we have Avadhi, we have Braj. The Hindi literature consists of Avadhi and Braj both. And Hindi speakers can, to some extent, definitely distinguish the two. And also speak the two, if one makes an effort after getting some information. Social act same, different classes, we can do that. So this is how we have the typology of style. All these types which we find in actual life can also be found in literature, either as a defining feature or as a creative feature. For example, in literature we have, at the level of speech community, dialects. So many authors use Thomas Hardy uses many dialects of rustic people, Wessex tales from Wessex, or of social varieties, high variety of language, middle variety of language, low variety of language, social actal varieties, they are used. Look at Shakespeare, he also does it. If you look at the different literatures of different times, if you look at maybe Kabir, or maybe contemporary poetry, or if you look at Spencer in English literature and Shakespeare, you know the differences of language. And modern poetry, if you look at modern poetry and look at Shakespeare, there is so much of difference, particularly use of pronouns, verb forms. So there is a style of Shakespearean English and the style of modern English, contemporary English. Fields also reflected in literature. Look at Milton. Paradise Lost. His theme was religious. He was using religion. It's governed by the domain of religion. Medium. All novelists and dramatists write their text. So writing is one thing. And when the drama is performed on the stage, it may sound very different because characters may do different things to the same line. Performance may be different. The same text may appear differently. So we have an oral, medium. Medium can also make a difference, and that also results in a distinctive style. At the level of tenor, role relationship, there is so much. In all literature, Othello speaking to his wife, well, always calling someone honest Iago, Othello, role relationship, a subordinate and superior trusting the subordinate. But role participation, when Iago is revealed as a villain, then he changes his language. His language suddenly changes. And it is no longer, he talks to me like an animal. He treats him as an animal. So the language changes on role participation. Pamela, a novel written by Richardson, is written in the letter form. From the University of Delhi, Professor Ruben Desai wrote a novel in the epistolary style of letter writing. Everything is letters, all the letters put together is a novel. That's the style. So people do a lot. At the level of individual, we know that different authors use different styles. Bacon uses a tripartite grammatical structure, syntactic structure in his essay Of Studies. The tripartite structure, we can go into the detail some other time, and it defines Bacon, Francis Bacon. There are idiosyncrasies. King Lear, his language is idiosyncratic in King Lear because it is the rule of a bad person. So the language of a bad person is different from others. It's all functionality. Now all these uses of different forms we find in literature too. But these forms will be again of two types, either overt or covert. By overt we mean if we identify the style with the author, it is used style is overt function. If you use it for identifying some character, it is identificatory factor. Identification of person, author, place, time, place, people related with it, their speech styles, their singular identification is overt. But when these speech styles are used for creating meaning within the context in a text, they become overt. And this overtness is when language becomes connotative. Language is full of connotations. The ordinary denotative language becomes connotation, and symbols, as symbols in art, and symbols in art becoming art symbols, they link with each other, modify meanings of each other, arrive at a finer intent, finer artistic meaning. That is the style that goes into covert style. We will look at this covert style when we do an analysis of a poem. So in addition to this now, when we have styles, another thing that needs to be said is the mixture of styles. Code mixing, code switching is another style. Code switching, English Hindi, English Tamil, English Bangla mixed together in the same speech community. They can say the same thing in different ways. Either it can be said in Hindi or it can be said in English. You can say Dant ka ilaj, you can say dental treatment, you can say Dant chikitsa. So there are so many ways. You can also say Dant ka treatment. Dant ka treatment would be code mixing. But then code mix has again a social function. It identifies people. If used in literature, it will function to indicate a meaning in the text. It will contribute to the meaning of the text in terms of character, in terms of context. It will create a situation. It will create a society. But then this comes through, in literature it comes through connotation. What do we mean by connotation? By connotation, what we have in mind, Roland Barthes considered connotation as a higher level of signification. Just like in our model in module 3, we had looked at the multi-leveled approach, sentence symbols, symbols in art, art symbols. One level going into another and signifying something else. It was based on Roland Barthes' model, connotation and denotation. According to Roland Barthes, there is a very interesting distinction between connotation and meta-language. Meta-language is the language of science, and connotation we find in poetic language, literary language. For him, both these emerge from the same science system. In Barthes' system of science, his science consists of two inseparable entities. One is expression, E, the other is content. And signification occurs when E and C are joined in a relationship. When they are in relation, then they become a sign. Signification is what the form and the content mean to speaker, to hearers. So they have a function. So when this ERC, the expression, content and the relationship as one sign, when this ERC becomes an element of another system, then two systems of signification are possible. And they're very different. What Roland Barthes attempts to say is, suppose we have a word, flower. Then flower is a particular word, or let's even say rose. Rose is a word. It has an expression, sounds and a content referring to one particular flower. The relationship of the sound and sense, sound and meaning gives us a symbol, a sign, that rose. But when this rose is used in a poem, my love is a red, red rose, newly sprung in June. The rose is not the rose flower. The meaning of the word rose has changed. It has become expressive of something else. So when this sign becomes expressive, it becomes the expression, and the expression comes under focus, and it gives another meaning. This is another level of sign. This is called connotation level. When the word, through contextual uses, picks up another dimension of meaning, expression is the same, meaning changes. Word remains the same, meaning changes. This is connotation. On the other hand, if the same sign is used to elucidate content, then there's a change in language. The form does not remain the same. Expression doesn't remain the same. The content remains the same. For example, what's a phoneme? Phoneme is a word, but we say, oh, a distinctive minimal unit of sound is phoneme. So distinctive minimal unit of sound has the same meaning as phoneme. They're stylistically different. The elaboration of the phoneme, elaborating the content, is metalingual function. In expression, in expressive language, the expression is the same, but meaning is modified, enlarged. But in content, the language changes. These are the two differences. In literary language, it is expressive. The expression remains the same, but the meaning keeps changing. That's how we get connotation. So we can stop here for this module. Now, what have you got from this module? What are we saying in this module? First of all, we pointed out that language is coming from language has inherent variation. Language is heterogeneous. Language is variation. It is differential. Meanings in language come from differences, making choices from the differences and using them, and that is how meanings become distinct in language. So it is, number one, it is differential. Language is heterogeneous. It is essentially based on differences and differences and differences. We make choices, and those choices become meaningful. It is not homogeneous, number one. Number two, from within this heterogeneity, we make choices, and our choices are systematic. Our choice depends upon who is speaking to whom, elder speaking to younger. Are you speaking in your dialect? Are you speaking in your village? Are you speaking in the city standard language? You will choose. Are you studying? Are you a student of some discipline? Within the discipline classroom, you will use that vocabulary. So our choices are dependent upon what we do, our role relationship, our field, our mode, our role relationship, our own personal likes and dislikes, the way we use words, our social class, our region. So depending on what different contexts, we choose language and put them systematically together, and that becomes a style marker. So choices from language as a heterogeneous entity. And of course, choices are systematic. Once you make a choice of your regional dialect, you will only make regional choices. So by making them systematic choices, the style it's marked by style. So this is how style is identified. And then we also talked about that style must be accepted as a construct in linguistics. A construct based on functions of language, not mere physical identification. Like it's something like ether, it's something like gravity, it's something like archiphoneme, something like that. It's known by structure, but mainly by function. That's necessary.